The moment. When the Supreme Court delivers a ruling that fundamentally recalibrates the engine room of the justice system, the sky rarely whispers, it usually speaks up. On the morning of June 18, 2026, the atmosphere in Washington is electric, charged with a rising toward dispersal energy reading on the cyclic index, suggesting a system that has built up pressure and is now actively releasing it. The dominant signature in the event chart is the tight opposition between Venus and Pluto. In mundane astrology, Venus doesn't just signify romance, it rules agreements, negotiations, and values, the very substance of a plea bargain. Pluto represents the state apparatus, covert power, and coercion. With these two locked in an opposition, we are seeing a clash between the mechanism of making a deal and the heavy, often suffocating hand of state power. This ruling, with the opposition acting as a brake, exposes when the deal, represented by Venus, has been corrupted by undue pressure from Pluto. It is a picture of the court stepping in to say that the value of an agreement evaporates if it is signed under the shadow of totalitarian tactics. Supporting this tension is the Sun in Gemini forming a semi-sextile to Jupiter in Cancer. While less dramatic than the opposition, this aspect is precise. Jupiter signifies the law and the courts, and its position in Cancer, the sign of protection and boundaries, suggests a legal correction aimed at shielding the vulnerable. The Sun's illumination here brings a specific, narrow focus to a broader principle of mercy. Meanwhile, Mercury, the ruler of Gemini and therefore the ruler of the moment, is sextile Mars in Taurus. The intellect and the pen, represented by Mercury, are effectively driving a wedge into established, ossified structures of Mars in Taurus, forcing a slow but steady shift in how legal force is applied. A specific note on the protagonist charts: Munson Hunter's natal data is not public, so we look at the birth moments of his legal struggles. The sky on June 18th actively triggers the chart of his initial guilty plea from February 2024. The transiting Sun, acting as the decision maker, sits in exact opposition to the Mars of that plea chart. This is a potent lights-on moment, revealing the aggressive, combative nature of the original coercive tactics. The court is effectively opposing that prior aggression, using the authority of the Sun to invalidate the force of that earlier moment. Similarly, the appeal dismissal chart sees transiting Saturn conjoined by the event sky. Time and the ultimate authority, Saturn, have finally caught up with the lower court's error. What it touches. This decision strikes at the heart of the United States' relationship with its own power. Transiting Jupiter in Cancer is in an exact, to-the-degree opposition to the United States' natal Pluto in Capricorn. This is a heavy signature. Jupiter, the judiciary, is directly challenging Pluto, the deep state and mechanisms of control. When the law squares off against deep structural power, the result is often a forced evolution of how the state wields its authority. The plebiscite of plea bargaining, a tool often criticized for bypassing the trial right, is being reined in by the higher principles of Jupiter. For the Supreme Court itself, the transits suggest an institution undergoing a sober maturation. Transiting Saturn in Aries forms a sextile to the court's natal Sun. Saturn is the bricklayer of the zodiac. In sextile to the court's identity, the Sun, it implies a strengthening of the institution's resolve through discipline and boundaries. This isn't an erratic ruling. It is a structural reinforcement of the court's role as a check on prosecutorial excess. Furthermore, the transiting North Node conjuncts the court's natal Mercury. The court's voice, Mercury, is aligning with its evolutionary path, the node. By speaking out against coercion, the court is stepping into its intended destiny as an arbiter of true justice, rather than just a rubber stamp for procedural efficiency. But the synastry between the court and the United States reveals why this ruling feels so personal to the national identity. The court's Uranus, representing disruption and reform, is conjunct the nation's North Node. The court is acting as the agent of necessary disruption, fulfilling the country's karmic requirement to reform its legal soul. It is a course correction embedded in the relationship between the government and its judiciary. The split decision is reflected in the individual portfolios of the justices. Justice Elena Kagan, writing for the majority, is under the influence of transiting Uranus squaring her natal Pluto. Uranus is the great awakener and disruptor. She is the vessel for the breakthrough energy, dismantling the established power dynamic of Pluto of plea deals. Conversely, Justice Clarence Thomas, the lone dissenter, experiences transiting Saturn in a harmonious trine to his natal Pluto. Saturn-Pluto contacts are often associated with the preservation of the established order and the maintenance of rigid structures. His stance embodies the Saturnian impulse, the preservation of the system's traditional authority, against the Uranian wave of reform. How it rolls forward. The weeks and months following this decision will not see an immediate end to plea bargaining, but rather a slow, grinding recalibration. We are approaching a total solar eclipse in Leo on August 12, 2026. Eclipses often act as doorways. In Leo, the sign of kingship and rulership, this eclipse suggests a reset regarding who holds the power in the courtroom, the state or the individual. The implications of Hunter will likely be dissected and expanded under this light, setting the stage for future disputes. More immediately, July brings a cascade of outer planet activity. Uranus trine Pluto and Jupiter opposite Pluto. These are world tension aspects. They speak to the friction between technological or social modernization, Uranus, and the entrenched plutocratic structures of power, Pluto. The Hunter ruling is the first visible crack in the pavement as these tectonic plates shift. We can expect lower courts to struggle with the application of miscarriage of justice definitions, creating a period of legal ambiguity that must be navigated carefully. Over the next 5 years, as the cyclic index continues toward dispersal, the central tension will be the pushback from the executive and prosecutorial branches against this judicial break. The state does not relinquish tools of control, Pluto, easily. However, with Saturn moving to sextile the court's sun, the institution is fortified for the long haul. They are not in a mood to compromise on this new principle. Watch for legislative attempts to fix or circumvent this ruling. This is the typical reaction when the law, Jupiter, tries to put a leash on the police power, Pluto. A draw for tarot cards yielded no results for this event, so we look strictly to the mechanics of the sky. Summary. The Hunter v. United States decision marks a corrective turning point where the Supreme Court, acting under a rare alignment of principle and authority, moves to dismantle the coercive machinery of the state's prosecutorial power. First, regarding legislative retaliation, you should watch for Congress or state legislatures drafting new statutes to narrow the definition of miscarriage of justice, driven by Jupiter opposing US Pluto. Second, expect a flood of appeals in the immediate months, seeing a rush of petitions from inmates citing this ruling, driven by Uranus square the event node. Third, prosecutorial retraining will occur as district attorney offices are forced to alter plea deal strategies under economic pressure, driven by Saturn sextile Scotus Sun. Fourth, there will likely be a public defender expansion, a sudden shift in resources toward defense counsel to handle the new legal landscape, driven by Jupiter trine Neptune. Finally, anticipate clarification from the court, meaning a follow-up case within 2 years to define the boundaries of this new precedent, driven by the solar eclipse in Leo. This is the law acting as a shield rather than a sword, a rare and necessary moment of restraint in an era of expansive state power. Recent history and where this is heading. The Hunter decision is not an isolated legal anomaly, but a distinct ripple in the larger current of the Saturn conjunct Neptune at 0 degrees Aries transit. This configuration symbolizes the necessary friction between established structures and the erosion of outdated ideologies, manifesting here as a judicial check on executive overreach. It signifies a collective moment where the fog of coercive state power is lifted, demanding a more austere and defined legal reality. As this cycle tightens in the coming year, the pressure release seen in this ruling is likely to deepen. The Saturn conjunct Neptune exactitude in February 2026 suggests a period of hardening these new boundaries, while the total solar eclipse in Leo in August 2026 may act as a dramatic reset point for the national narrative regarding justice and authority. While individual news stories appear fragmented, they are ultimately bound by this shared atmospheric pressure. The slow struggle to redefine the limits of power is a civilizational imperative currently playing out across courts, borders, and economies alike. Before you go, if news of this ruling has stirred the waters of your own life, perhaps leaving you feeling vulnerable in the face of shifting power structures, know that you do not have to navigate this grinding recalibration blindly. I recommend starting with the monthly transit forecast, which will help you see exactly how the upcoming solar eclipse in Leo and the heavy outer planet activity mentioned will aspect your personal chart, giving you the foresight to move through the coming weeks of legal ambiguity with confidence. For those feeling the psychological weight of this era, where the shadow of totalitarian tactics is being brought to light, the Tarot standard reading, specifically the Shadow Work spread, offers a path to integration. It is designed to help you confront the masks you wear and the wounds beneath, turning the Plutonian pressure of these times into a source of hidden strength and personal evolution. Both are waiting for you at Occultic whenever you feel ready to look deeper. Today, Saturday the 27th of June 2026, I'm drawing the 4 Directions 5-card spread from the Smith-Waite standard deck to sit with the aftershocks of Hunter v. United States. The medicine wheel turns around the Supreme Court's corrective shift, gauging where the pressure released on the 18th is still moving in your week ahead. Expect a reading less about comfort and more about clear-eyed orientation. The cards map institutional grief, a strategist's vantage, slow legal homework, and the endless practical juggling that follows when Pluto's shadow is dragged into the light. East, beginnings, 5 of Cups. Mars in Scorpio, ruled by Pluto, stares at 3 fallen cups. The coerced pleas hunter exposed, yet 2 still stand, remnant rights worth reclaiming. This is the dawn of mourning institutional betrayal before any true rebuilding. It casts a shadow toward the 2 of Wands, warning that action without first honoring this loss risks hollow conquest. South, action, 2 of Wands. Mars in Aries here is the spark the hunter ruling needs, opposing the plea chart Mars, the transiting sun exposed in Taurus. You must choose between Kagan's Uranian breakthrough and Thomas's Saturnian preservation, both views looming like the card's twin wands. It bridges the 5 of Cups grief and the Page of Pentacles slow study ahead. West, reflection, Page of Pentacles. Mercury's earthy Page of Pentacles channels the sextile to Mars in Taurus, passing Hunter's fallout and insisting you test the ground. Let go of the fantasy that Pluto's power dissolves overnight. Inherit instead the practical grief of the 5 of Cups. It receives the 2 of Wands vision and readies soil for the 2 of Pentacles weighing. North, wisdom, 2 of Pentacles. Jupiter in Capricorn dances the endless chord of legislative retaliation against Hunter, statutes drafted to narrow justice's scope. Here is the wisdom that recalibration is a grind. Saturn sextile the court's sun says the structure holds if you keep rhythm. It passes the Page of Pentacles study to the King of Swords for final arbitration. Center, self/situation, King of Swords. Mercury in Gemini and the North Node conjunct the court's voice, make this King of Swords the hunter ruling itself, sheathed clarity cutting coercion. Here the 5 of Cups grief, the 2 of Wands choice, and the 2 of Pentacles juggling converge. Speak with detached precision, let the Page of Pentacles earth and the King of Swords air draft your move. Summary. This spread circles a single imperative. The hunter ruling broke the seal, but the work of justice is granular. From the 5 of Cups mourning to the King of Swords verdict, you are asked neither to panic nor to cheer, but to witness the grind and place yourself clearly within it. Walk forward with clear eyes.